It's like I'll introduce myself. I'm Tracy Schultz. I'm with Co-op Radio here in Austin, Texas. Thank y'all guys so much. It's like for doing the Q&A.
Hey, Tracy. Sure. Nice to meet you.
My name is Noah. I write for WhatCulture.com. It's based in the UK, and I freelance from here in Texas.
Okay.
Y'all guys just came from a nice big ballroom panel
Yeah.
talking about this movie.
Wait, one more intro. I'm Christian.
Oh,
Christian from Glide Magazine.
Hey, Christian.
Hi there.
I'm Burnie, by the way, just to introduce ourselves.
Hey, Philip. I'm Marcus. I'm the production designer. Daniel Cabello.
Matt Hullum.
thank you guys
He's
so
our
much.
co-director.
Yeah, y'all just came from a big panel talking about this very movie that we get to talk again about. It's nice. It's like the release date, the official release date for Lazer Team 2 is how far away from now?
We have not announced it yet. It's coming out this fall.
Yeah.
So that's what we can tell you so far. Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, it's like getting shot out of a cannon. I feel like the movie's like coming out so fast from when we started it. Actually, in the first movie, was we basically we worked on the first movie for maybe like 6 months longer because we shot it in like October, November. Is that right? Yeah. Of like 2014, and then we didn't finish it until September of 2015, and then it didn't actually come out until January of the following year. So this movie's all taking place from writing it to releasing it in one calendar year.
Impressive.
Yeah, it's been crazy.
That's not how it feels.
yeah, it
Yeah.
really doesn't feel
Yeah.
right. It just feels like it was a longer time ago, but it was just 4 months ago we were shooting.
Yeah.
Yeah, if that.
I
Yeah.
think 3 months, and it's like Michael had his kid like a month after we stopped shooting, so I was like, yeah, it's been a crazy ride.
Just right.
I remember there was folks, because I have friends who do extra work and things like that in films. It's like, oh, is that filming? It's like, oh, they already wrapped up already.
Yeah.
So was the shoot itself is like really quite condensed and quick for y'all?
It was about half the length of the first movie in terms of shooting it. We shot for 20 days.
20 days. 20 days.
And then we have actually 2 days of pickups coming up, which is pretty standard.
We'll let you know.
Yeah. But the first movie our main shoot was 40 days.
Yeah.
It was actually 30 nights out of like 40 days in terms of movie days, but 30 of them were nights. And
It felt like 100% nights.
Yeah.
To me, I don't know when I think about that production, it was at night in the cold.
It's hard to remember the days. Yeah. And then we had another 3 days of pickups after that. So yeah, we were able to really condense the schedule on this one, mainly because so much of it takes place on a stage, and we were just able to shoot a lot faster. Like in the first movie, I think we had like 1 or 2 days in the same environment where we had a stage set, and we burned through like 7 pages a day.
Wow.
And that was like, oh, this is great. And so coming onto this movie, it's like we knew the only way we were gonna get it done in time, because we were losing the cast. Michael and Gavin had to go on tour, on Let's Play Live tour, and it was like
Cole had another movie.
Colt had another movie. He started like
Yeah.
the next day, and you were going off to something too.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was now.
Was it the thing you did in Europe?
An event thing, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, everyone, like, we had him up until like the mid-April, like April 24th. Is that when something around there we were done, and then that was it. So we had to figure out a way to get it done with the time we had.
Mhm.
But I don't feel like we shortchanged on anything. Like looking at the dailies and as the edits coming together, it's like we amazingly we got everything. So it's good. Learn from the first one, I guess.
Cool. Well, feel free to jump in. But I was curious. It's like about that. It's like a lot of things that happened. Y'all talked a little bit about this in the panel. From the first Lazer Team movie to this, it's like as a company and all this other things, it's like everything was developing with outside things. It's like with Rooster Teeth. At the same time, you're trying to write a script and do all the schedule for Lazer Team 2. How did that kind of help make the script that you had for Lazer Team 2 tighter before you started shooting? It's like was there distractions? What were some of the challenges y'all had?
Well, I don't know. I think Burnie and Daniel and I all wrote on the script, and I think for me, this script was actually more challenging because one, like the restrictions we had given ourselves in terms of like going to space and how the entire story was going to unfold, like necessitated, certain things be fit into the script in a certain way, and it's like you're starting from puzzle pieces where you don't know the picture on the box, but you know these puzzle pieces have to fit together, and there are a lot of twists and turns and reveals in this movie. I'd say a lot more than the first movie, and some of those got very complicated as we were shooting, and there's always like something that you want to do that ends up not being possible to do. So then on the fly you have to change, like, we didn't get this piece of art or this location, it's not going to happen, or whatever, and then you have to change things on the fly, and when you do, in a movie like this, that just sets off a spiral kind of effect where all of these little plot points get adjusted. So we actually did a fair amount of kind of like tweaking and script doctoring on set, but I think it worked out really well. I think it probably made some people want to pull their hair out, probably Marcus. But
when we go into a project, you hope that everything is already predetermined. For our department, there's a lot of responsibility. There's a lot of things to provide that can be on camera. The only way for me to really know what that is and have it ready on time is for someone to make a commitment for what it is.
Yeah.
So sometimes when we'd be in the middle of a scene and it would get rewritten and the art would change or the setting would change or some of the exposition
or someone would just find a prop laying around set,
or we needed something that was never thought about, and we had to kind of come up with that and figure out ways to still deliver. So
the writing process, there were two notable things where because of the time and certain budget restrictions, we worked in tandem with Marcus to like make sure that the things we were writing into the script could actually be made. Because when you write simple things like a person walks through a door or through a vent or has this or that, it does someone has to make that. And so, at a certain point, it's just like, okay, Marcus, can you? Or is there a clever way to not do that? Or, and how that works. And then the other part was that sometimes we would just design a scene with a certain plot point or specific moment we wanted, and we would let the actors play in that scene, and sometimes they would just go and create something or find a new prop. We showed a scene today with just a prop that we kind of just went with on set, and it turns out it shows on camera because everybody's having fun.
Yeah, and the first movie too is it's original idea, original story, but it is still an origin story, and so there's just basic pillars that you have to have. Like, we had to show who the characters were in their normal lives, then some event takes place, and then we see what they do and what they become later in the film. Whereas when we got to the second movie, we didn't have the burden of having to do that, so we could break outside the mold and just tell kind of, after now we've set up in the first movie, we could tell like a completely unique Lazer Team story and not have to follow like any of the.
I thought that was an advantage for us too. It was like we didn't have to set up the characters. We didn't have to help the audience understand who these people were in the first 20 minutes. It's like you're probably already aware of who these people are for the most part. It's a sequel, so like they were able to sort of like jump right in. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
And sort of playing off that, or not that, but from before, were there any problems you had with the first film that you feel like you corrected this time around, or just anything you felt like you improved upon?
Well, I think Burnie touched on, or both Burnie and Daniel touched on the having more prominent female characters in the movie, and I feel like that's a really great way that we've evolved the movie and the story, and just to kind of the character dynamic in this movie is like I think the female characters are all really great and really strong and very different, so there's a lot of new texture there. It's really fun. We had different challenges on this movie where, like, because it was so stage based and not very location based, I feel like when we set out to make the first movie, like Burnie and I wanted to have a big action scene in a high school, so it's like our big like struggle there was like, where can we find a high school that's going to let us blow shit up, and but that's like a solvable problem. And then in this movie it's like, oh, we wrote this like crazy action scene that takes place on a spaceship, And then you go to Marcus, and he's like, I can't, I don't have time to do. How am I going to get that done? You know, and it's like there's no spaceship in reality. I can't find a, you know,
Location
same way
scout.
I can't location scout a spaceship the same way we could a high school. So it was just it was a completely different ball of wax.
Did that change your also your budget? It's like for special effects. It's like in your time that it takes like to do that.
It did shift. Like this movie is like a lot more money went into art in this movie as like a percentage of the movie compared to the first movie.
Yeah, I think the first movie was almost all Earth-based location. I think it was. It was like all the locations were Earth-based, so we could kind of take advantage of the fact that oh, there's a house over here, there's a building here, there's a facility here that fits the bill. And for this one, it was like no, it's all has to be made from scratch. So,
I also felt like it put more of a burden on Phil too, because like in some ways, like having like a bunch of different locations it's hard because you have to light all these different locations and think about that. But it's also like, well, now I have at least a different view, that I can use and like complete my kind of like visual tapestry of putting all these different locations together, and that kind of gives you along the way. But from this, it's like he had to come up with something that looked fresh and original in these spaceship locations where it's like a bunch of different hallways, and they're different sets and they look different, but it's also kind of like it's more alien than the first movie and less terrestrial. Is that right?
I think I thought you were saying that art took all the our money.
Yeah, that's true.
I felt that way. No, but it was kind of funny because speaking of like the crossover, I wish I was there a little earlier to help with because we had talked briefly about the design of the hallways, and it was like I wanted at like about 4 feet to do this slit going across so we can put the lights just right so that they'll nail them right in the eye and it'll look really cool and have that nice long sci-fi look going through their eyes. And so they constructed that in and also made some other things for us to make it even cooler. The problem was we didn't budget for all that LED lighting that was going to go through this whole spaceship, which was over 1,000, almost 2,000 feet, I think. And we wanted to get the good stuff to make sure we could shoot high-speed slow motion and the lights won't flicker, because you can get cheap stuff. And I know you guys were looking, and those might almost still have worked. I don't know. It was a close one.
There's like quality differences in LED lighting, and the higher quality ones don't cycle on camera, even at higher frame rates. So you can shoot super slow-mo, still get plenty of lights. If you can always tell where there's like a bulb flickering or cycling in the shot. So that's what we were trying to avoid. And it was a significant price jump.
But it looked a lot. It helped complete what they had done such a good job of with these circular hallways. Like, I was frustrated because I wanted even more of that stuff, because I felt like that makes it alive. It makes the hallways come to life when you have this power, this entity that's pushing light through it versus shooting light onto it, having shadows and things you can't have.
That was kind of the difference. Is like we didn't have the hallways were tight enough that we couldn't put extra lights in there. There was no room for stands.
Mm-hmm.
It was like the lighting had to be integrated and also be practical, not just to show a color or a light on camera, but also practically light our character.
It's a real working spaceship.
Yeah, and that was stressful. Yeah, kind of. I mean, it doesn't fly; it falls. But I wanted to talk about the tank. I was like, oh man, ever since I've met these guys from the first Lazer Team, and I've done like more more like crime thriller, drama, more normal things than I meet these guys. And I don't know if I can talk about the tank. I don't want to say anything about that. Probably not. But I
should talk around the tank. Generally.
Yeah, I'll say
It's a water tank.
Is tank okay?
Yeah.
It's not it's not like an army tank. It's like a water tank.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You got me confused at first.
But I end up in these craziest places and situations ever since I've met these guys. And I thought, I'd seen, some stuff and done crazy movies in Toronto where we had, guys that maybe not, I don't want to say anything. But anyway, I've seen a lot of things happen, nothing like this, and ended up like, when you zoom out of your life and you say, what am I doing here in this thing? And then I zoom back in, I was like, wait, these guys wrote it. What are they doing?
Yeah, right.
It's like
Well,
My goal was to torture Burnie as much as possible throughout the film.
When I introduced Phil at the panel, I called him the greediest man in cinema, and it's because we really had a great time on the first movie where we were kind of fighting each other who could be the most greedy with the shots, which is basically like you want like the angle you want, and sometimes you just need like another like 3 inches to get the camera in the right place, and you just have to fight for those 3 inches. You know, like you gotta dig a hole, or you gotta push somebody the way, you gotta chop down a tree, whatever you gotta do.
The floor.
Exactly. And Phil, like I'll think I've gone to the limit, you know, and then Phil's like, no, I'm gonna get a little bit more. So when he talks about the hard things that he did in the movie, and we were talking about Burnie being put through the ringer on that.
Yeah.
Every time Burnie gets put through the ringer, Phil's right next to him, you know, getting the shrapnel of whatever it is. And yeah, you were in some kooky positions in this movie for sure.
Yeah.
Are you guys at all concerned with the stigma that typically goes along with film sequels or sequels in general?
Well, we make really long-form series at Rooster Teeth, and so not too worried about it, just because we've had a lot of success with Ruby and Red vs. Blue, and, you know, some of our gaming franchises as well. It's, you know, we have a lot of experience of building on characters that we've established.
I think the focus for us wasn't necessarily to address any stigmas that come with that, but was to just make sure that we were true to the first film, focused on these characters and how they interact with the new characters that we're introducing. There's a new alien character. We have Nicole Bloom's character, Maggie, Victoria Pratt, and Ali DeBerry comes back. And it's like, how do they interact in these weird situations? And then the other thing that we wanted to do was just make it a comedy throughout. You know, just like it's still an adventure and it's still sci-fi, but make sure that we're trying to let the actors have fun and then let the audience laugh, like at every turn if we can.
I was curious about co-directing. How did y'all do the duties as co-directors? It's like, was there certain scenes that you gave to each other that while doing like maybe 2 locations or anything like that? How was that?
Actually, we never split up locations for us. I don't think we really wanted to do that, and it was such a tight window that we didn't do that. But from my perspective, we would always, I think, sometimes decide on the day of just like, okay, I think, Matt, this is like a scene that you can take more with the actors or whatever. And we tried to make sure that as much as possible, it's not always the case, but like that we were speaking with one voice. Mm-hmm. And so it would be very much like, okay, let's make sure we have a plan, and then let's have this person go and take that, and, you know, and make sure that Phil knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
But Phil can speak to that too.
I can definitely speak on that half, just being in my position, being able to communicate with both of them, as I'm sure you can too. I definitely saw, like, with me and Daniel, we kind of helped prepare it a little bit more and like dial in like the plan of attack. Matt's running a company too, so you know, he's not always around for that, and so we would plan the attack, and then we jumped into it, and then Matt came in with us, and then Matt had known all these actors really well and had a good relationship with them, so he was kind of more the voice, I felt like, more or less sometimes with the actors itself, whereas Daniel was kind of focused on like, let's talk about how we're going to make it look and the plan of attack, and then you guys talked a lot more, and then it kind of came together. But it was really nice. Like, I call it mommy and daddy, because, you know, like, they're always like, don't, you know, they
we did get the mommy daddy thing a bunch, where somebody would come up to us and ask, like, Daniel, hey Daniel, could I do this in the scene? And Daniel said, no, you can't do that. And then they'd find me and go, hey Matt, could I do this in the scene? You know?
Totally it. Because like Daniel usually, like, from what I've gathered, is like, we're very thoughtful, like, this is what we want to do, and then Matt's more fun. Like, I know when in doubt, because how the first Lazer Team went, and thankfully it did because of all the explosions and things that we had, but it was like, so people would take advantage of that, and it's like, oh, this would be really cool.
Well, it took me on that point, I think I'm fun, for the record. for the record. But no, it was one of those things where I think it was like being so prepared, and then also being, you know, just a little nervous at first, you know, first feature, but also just like trying to realize it took a couple of days to be like, okay, this set and the actors need to be able to play, right? And it's like you have to, at certain points, give up. You have to be willing to throw out everything you prepared. Right? If you don't do that, which is difficult, but if you don't do that, then the movie suffers. So at every turn, you have to just give up some things to the film.
That's a good point.
Sort of on that note, and touching a little bit on like what you were saying with LED lights flickering and things like that, were there any accidents in any of this regard, acting or sets that you ended up using and incorporating into the film that you hadn't planned on?
We can talk about the stunt injury, right?
That we just did. Yeah, I mean, we had a stunt person who, aggressively went after a stunt and it looked great,
Yeah.
but she was aggressive. Yeah.
She was aggressive and she went for it, and but she's fine and everything was great. But and we're using that take in the movie.
Which is the best compliment, really.
We didn't get to talk about it during the panel, but the stunt crew for Lazer Team 2 was really amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really fun experience versus the first one, where giving a stunt crew the ability to flex some of their comedic muscles is really great, because they don't often get an opportunity to do that. And some of the stuff they can do in stunts is really fun and funny, and they look for the opportunity to do it. And they really stepped up. I mean, they were great.
Yeah, that's really true. It was a lot more physical comedy acting from the stunt team in particular on this movie.
Definitely the word. Yeah.
And it took it was a little bit of a dance between me and Stunts, because it was like Stunts was always wanting something over the top huge, and I was just like, I'm not sure we can provide that. They were like, we want to take the helmet and we're gonna do this and we'll throw it across the room and it'll land here and then so and so's gonna do a new thing, and then I was like,
and they'll go through the wall.
I know, and he's like, it's gonna go through, and I'm like, man, this is the only helmet we got. Like, it took us 3.5 weeks just to make this helmet. It's like, I don't think we can risk it.
Yeah,
I was like,
great.
maybe if we were later in the movie, but it's like, this is the first week. I was like, no, we're not doing it.
Yeah.
So like, I remember nixing one thing.
There was a lot of negotiations and stuff like that, because I mean, that is the one challenge of making a lower budget sci-fi film. If this were a $100 million film, Marcus would have 50 helmets.
I say yes. And,
and be like, cool.
Pull out another helmet.
Yeah,
and we could do 50 takes.
Yeah.
Your budget.
Yeah.
On this one, we gotta be a little more careful.
It's like, it's the only helmet we have, Jeff.
Yeah. It'll be a really great gag.
Oh.
So just speaking to funding, you guys are talking about budget, and I know like the last movie, of course, you went to crowdfunding, you had the fans support it, and this one is more, it was kind of internally. I guess was there any reason for that change kind of behind the scenes? Do you guys have like a better time after the first movie came out to get funding this next year around?
Well, I thought you had a pretty great.
Yeah, I talked about it a little bit during our panel, but I said, there's really crowdfunding is a weird animal, because there's almost no upside from the audience perspective. Meaning, if you have a crowdfunding campaign, you make your goal, but then you don't produce whatever the thing is, whether it's a movie or a product or whatever, then the next time you try to crowdfund something, people say, well, why would I crowdfund this project? You didn't make the last thing. And likewise, though, when you make something and it does well, then when you go to crowdfund the second one, they're like, well, why do you need money now? Because the second one worked and was profitable. So it's kind of a double-edged sword when it comes to crowdfunding. But for us, it was really hard to kind of leave it behind. It did take a little bit of a pressure off of us, because the first one, we told the audience we were making this thing before we had it funded, right? So they were aware of Lazer Team, the first one, 2 years before the movie came out, which is a long time for a web audience to wait for something. And on this one, we just got to say, hey, we're shooting this thing next month, and now it's coming out at the end of the year, So that's a lot of fun, and a lot of that is due directly to the relationship with YouTube and Google, just saying we want another one as soon as we put
Is it going to be on YouTube Red as well? Are they,
Yeah, it's on YouTube Red.
I wanted to ask how the relationship was with there. I spoke with the comedian actor Rob Hubel last week about his project, and he's sung its praises as like this hoodie and hoverboard culture.
Hoodie and hoverboard culture. That's great.
It was like the Wild West, and they just sort of let him run wild with his project. Did you have a similar experience?
Yeah, and we also fund projects as well through Rooster Teeth first, and I would give the same compliment to YouTube Red that one of our producers gave to us. After we made our series Crunch Time, one of the comedian actors that was the lead actor in that series came to us and they said, hey, a bunch of my friends have projects, other comedians they'd like to pitch to you. I said, bring him on in, let's talk to him. I said, but I got to ask, what makes him think about, coming to Rooster Teeth? And he said it very simply, he goes, well, you guys make stuff, and it's just one of those things where there's a lot of people like Rob, I'm sure, who spent a lot of time in Hollywood where, you have a great idea and it just stays in development for up to 10 years, where it's just like you're waiting for this thing to, move ahead. And with, places like YouTube Red and Rooster Teeth, it's like we have an idea. It's like, yeah, let's do this. Let's go forward. And, and I give a lot of credit to YouTube for doing that. If you look at their first slate they did of YouTube original shows, it was all people that came up through the YouTube environment. They like went to their core to launch their big platform. You know, usually you'd expect when they do something like that, like, oh, here's somebody from the Lakers who always wanted to make a series or something like that, you know, or and there's not any of that. You know, they weren't even doing like reboots of TV shows, which is a common thing to do in digital networks. You know, they were going to original programming made by their core community.
To that end, doing shows, it's like at Rooster Teeth is a little bit different. It's like than doing movies. We talked a little bit, it's like about the calendar cycle and things like that. It kind of took us like for Lazer Team 1 and Lazer Team 2 is like a year, but still a year is a long time in compared to like doing a short series TV show and having it out there immediately.
Yeah.
What are some of the I guess the push and pulls like for your guys? It's like for Lazer Team 2 versus taking care of business of everything else. It's like at Rooster Teeth and the other productions. Was there any frustrations just like with the time that it takes to make Lazer Team 2?
Well, I mean, I guess I can only speak for myself. But yeah, I mean, it's hard in that for me, I had a lot less time for this movie than I did for the first one, and I didn't even feel like I had enough time for the first one. So I was really thankful to Daniel and the crew for doing such a good job, and felt like I was able to just come in and hopefully kick it up a couple notches, you know. But it's like making a project over the course of a year where you don't release any of it, like on a weekly basis as we would with a show, whether it's a long form show or a short form. You don't get that feedback loop with the audience, and so we do miss that. And I think what also is very difficult is trying to maintain consistent tone. Like one of the hardest things to do, I think, with a movie at any level is just finding the tone of the movie that you want and just being laser focused on that. Because I really think that is what makes a movie feel complete and cohesive for an audience. Like they can tell if like you can make a bad joke, or you can have like a location that's not perfect, or some of your art can be kind of off, or whatever. Not saying that Marcus's art was off in anyway, but I'm saying like on any movie, like you can get away with like kind of like the technical hiccups, I think. But when your tone veers off, and the characters aren't true to themselves over the course of the entire production, like that's where I think audiences just go, I'm tuning out, I've lost suspension of disbelief. And that's really the hardest thing when you're making something over the course of a year. Like, is the movie at the final frame the movie you thought it was at the beginning frame?
We'll do one last question.
As a movie watcher, I sometimes feel like trailers kind of spoil the movies. And you guys at Rooster Teeth, you have more control over the marketing and what exactly was shown in the trailer, what isn't. Do you think that kind of, I guess, like, what do you think the input is there from a director to, like, marketing? Do you think they should have that control and everything? Do you think it's helped you guys out?
I actually have somewhat of a cynical answer, which is, we always try really hard not to spoil stuff in trailers or give things away because we think it's more fun for the audience to see it. But I think most marketing nowadays is just like, tell them the whole movie in the trailer.
Yeah, doesn't matter if they enjoy the movie when they get there, as long as they get there.
Yeah.
We don't believe that.
Yeah.
And this is a place where this being a sequel helps us, because in the first one, we had to tell people what it was, inform them a little bit more to get them to come out and see it. But for the sequel, I think we just have the obligation to show this is fun. Look at this. Here's some hints as to what it's about without giving too much away. Whereas in the first one, people don't know what Lazer Team is. They've never heard of it before. So we had to give more information for them to understand why they might see it.
Yeah, the goal with this first teaser trailer was basically to try to establish the tone that Matt's talking about and just make sure that, I think, personally, I think I like controlling the first images people see. You do that in tandem with a marketing team, obviously, but establishing that tone is very important. So you may not be spoiling anything or giving them the story, but at least you're informing them of maybe a little of what to expect, and hopefully it's what they want.
dude, and everything I've seen so far, like this is one of the images from marketing. Like all the original
pretty good,
drafts
right?
of the marketing stuff is better than anything.
Did you
we
see
had
your
in the first
4x6?
I did. I haven't seen it in person, but I saw it in the digital version of it. So.
All right, thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you
a lot.
guys.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate your time.